Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of my podcast. I created this podcast because I really like podcasts. I've had my email newsletter for years now, maybe like 7 years. But I realized recently that I may enjoy podcasts even more than email at this point. There's something about having someone speak to you person to person in your ear for an extended period of time. It feels so helpful and encouraging and useful. And also, I'm different in speaking than in writing. There's a different feel to someone's voice, their mannerisms. So I'm hoping that if you like my work and my writing, that you enjoy this format even more. And of course, if you've never met me, if this is your very first exposure to me and my work, oh my gosh, an even bigger welcome. I am so glad you're here. I also created this podcast because I wanted a way for people who were considering working with me one-on-one, considering hiring me to be their life coach, to get just a more in-depth and intimate feel to what I'm like before even getting on a consult call. So if that's you, if you're considering hiring me to be your life coach, I hope this is a helpful preview of my ideas and just me more generally. So today I want to talk about energy. And more specifically, I wanted to talk about a concept that I created called energy debt. First, let's talk about energy. In particular, why am I spending the very first episode of my podcast talking about it? Energy and authenticity, which will be what I talk about in my next episode, are sort of like the foundation of the house that we are building when it comes to my work with my clients. I work with my clients on lots of other topics too, obviously, building meaningful relationships and becoming much more effective at work, or finally writing that screenplay they've always wanted to write. But literally nothing can get done that is useful without energy and authenticity. That's why I use this house metaphor. It's difficult to build anything at all without a strong foundation, or anything we build will come crashing down. So I'm going to talk a lot more, as I said, about authenticity in my next episode. But on the topic of energy, if you don't have energy, you can't get anywhere. Energy is the fuel in the car. And I think most of us get this in terms of action. Like, yeah, I know I can't start a new business without energy, for example. But it also just literally takes energy to do the kind of self-reflection required to even know the direction that's right for you. Like, it takes some energy to be able to figure out what drains or energizes you. It takes some energy to be able to prioritize in the very rigorous way that's required to actually meaningfully reduce your hours at work, which is something that I very often help my clients do, reduce their hours at work without sacrificing quality, and in fact, often increasing the quality of the work that they do. So there's this way in which getting energy back, which is sort of what some of these actions I talked about do, actually requires some energy as an input. It's like that whole you've got to spend money to make money thing, but with energy. So that's why energy is like this foundation of the house that I'm building with my clients. They need at least some energy or we can't build anything at all. And many, I will even say most of my clients are tired. It could be extreme burnout, they're completely exhausted, or just sort of low-level tired that maybe is mixed up in a cocktail of other emotions. They're anxious, or they're insecure, or they're agitated a lot of the time, or overwhelmed, or feeling stuck, but tired is kind of mixed in. So, in trying to explain to these clients over the years what was going on with their energy and help them increase their energy with as much ease and speed as possible, which of course is why they hire me, I came up with the concept of energy debt. At its core, the idea of energy debt is just the idea that energy and money work in some surprisingly similar ways. Every day, you accumulate energy from sleeping, from processing the foods that you eat, or just from activities or people that nourish you. And this energy I'm talking about, to be clear, is your emotional energy for life. I'm not talking about the literal energy you have from the calories you ate that day, though, of course, your food does influence how much energy you have for life. And every day, of course, you also expend energy on everything you do. So going to work or making dinner, perhaps changing your toddler's diaper when they really, really don't want you to change their diaper and they're screaming right in your ear, just to give a totally random example that never happens to me. The net effect of this over time, not in a single day, we're really talking about over time. The net effect of this over time is something I would call your energy net worth. Literally, that just means how much energy you have for life. If you have plenty of energy reserves, you have more than enough energy for all that you want to do in the world. So in this sort of financial energy metaphor, I'd call that having a positive energy net worth. Or on the flip side, you can be in energy debt. You have overspent your energy consistently over an extended period of time. One of the keys about energy debt is that it's like most kinds of other financial debt. In other words, you accumulate interest. So most people can feel sort of intuitively the difference between having energy in their bank accounts and the opposite, being in energy debt. So in terms of having energy in your bank account, you may have a memory of a time when something energetically expensive happened to you, but you kind of emerged basically okay. Like you spent a lot of energy, but your energy net worth was still basically positive. On a personal note, that happened to me about a year ago when we first learned about one of my son's health issues, and he had to spend a couple of days in the hospital. It was scary, it was exhausting, but I had a pretty reasonable amount of energy afterwards, after sort of coming back from the initial exhaustion. I was pretty much okay. By contrast, you might also think of a time when there was something that wasn't really that tiring objectively, but that thing all the same completely exhausted you. Maybe you had to do something at work that on a normal day would be okay, but on this day, it just seemed impossible. When that happened, you were probably not in great shape in terms of the energy in your bank account. You were too close to empty, or you were already in debt, so this brought you further into debt. The point here is not what happens to your energy on a given day. We all have days that are energetically exhausting for one reason or another. The point is overall. Do you have the reserves for what you need, or are you perpetually exhausted? And if you laughed at the concept of even having energy reserves, if you thought, well, that's impossible, or that sounds like a pipe dream, Katie, you're definitely not alone. Most of my clients are on a financial level actually quite responsible. They have 401ks, they're thoughtful about investment strategies or budgeting. They might even have debt, but it's thoughtfully and carefully chosen. They have a carefully considered decision to buy a house, for example, or a mortgage that they really looked into and thought about interest rates and thought who their lender was going to be. On the other hand, many of my clients are basically living paycheck to paycheck with maxed out credit cards when it comes to their energy. And this has huge implications across their lives. I really like the concept of energy debt for two reasons. The first one is that it helps my clients understand on a more visceral level what they've been doing for years and often for decades. Typically, they've just been assuming that they have an inexhaustible supply of energy, that they can spend it on whatever they want and then it doesn't matter. I think this metaphor often helps them see how they have, through a bunch of separate actions, contributed to their current situation. They can see that part of their exhaustion is just the compounding effect of kind of overspending energy-wise for so long. And then there's the interest. That interest is costing you a lot. And if they continue in that way, spending more than they make, they're only going to make the problem worse, and they will only get more interest over time. The second reason I like this metaphor is because I think it helps us cultivate agency. Most of us already have a kind of intuitive understanding about debt and how debt works and how to get out of it. And I think this helps us understand more about what the journey to paying off our energy debt will be like and how we can do it more effectively. So I really want to talk to you in just a moment about paying off energy debt. But first, I just want to make a small side note about the causes of energy debt. I want to be very, very clear. I am not here to say that you 100% caused your energy debt. Obviously, there can be extremely compelling reasons why you feel tired. Maybe you have a very young child. Maybe your job is extremely demanding. Maybe both of those things apply to you and you've got 6 other reasons. On a personal level, for me, in the past year, one of my sons, I have fraternal twin boys who are just about to turn 2. One of them had some quite serious medical issues, and there were months at a time where I was operating on a much more empty energy tank, a much lower energy bank account than I would prefer. So I'm not here to say, oh, this is your fault that you're so tired. You 100% caused it. I didn't cause my son's medical issues. We actually don't really know what caused them. And yet it's almost always true that there's something you can do about that energy debt eventually. So when I was first in the hospital with my son, for example, I wasn't worrying about the energy I was expending. I was just getting him care. But as the months wore on and we had specialists to see and therapists to coordinate and a lot of appointments and medical records and insurance, it just became clear to me that this was a marathon and not a sprint. So I did make a number of life changes to help myself have more energy and pay off the energy debt that I had accumulated. Which is to say, absolutely, energy debt can be brought on by circumstances. There is so much of life that requires energy and that we want and need to spend a massive amount of energy on. And also, most of us have the ability to pay off our energy debts much more effectively than we may be doing now. And I think this is really important to underline or highlight in your head. Most of us have the ability to have more energy than we do now. Okay, let's talk about paying off energy debt. When we go back to basic personal finance is 101. There are 2 ways to pay off debt. You either have to make more money and or lower your expenses. Or if you want to pay off debt the fastest, you might want to work on both. And that's actually exactly what I do with my clients. I help them reduce the ways in which they are overspending their energy unnecessarily. And then I also help them try to increase their energy. Obviously, the utility of hiring a coach is that it's always incredibly personalized, but here's a couple of general ideas that I hope will be of service to you. The first thing to say about paying off energy debt is that you may not want to look for how to do this to the people around you. Sometimes my clients say things to me like, oh, but my boss seems to be okay working super long hours, or, but my friend seems to want to spend all of her non-working hours with her kids. But here's the thing. Your boss, she's probably in energy debt. Your best friend, who's that super mom, she's probably in energy debt too. If everyone you knew was in terrible credit card debt, I would not recommend imitating their financial behaviors. That wouldn't be my recommendation. This, of course, on a financial level is true of a lot of the US population. Many, many people are in significant debt. So for many people, being in a positive financial position requires making some financial choices that might be different from the norm. And again, I say this while holding the complexity that lots of people have lots of good reasons why they're tired. The first step to paying off energy debt is being willing to make some different choices than maybe your mom made, or maybe your coworkers are making, or maybe anyone around you is making. So that's the first thing. The second thing to say about energy debt is that you must, and I mean must, figure out what actually drains versus energizes you. This is one of those points that sounds really obvious, but actually isn't. It can actually be pretty hard for 2 reasons. The first is that people often don't actually factually and accurately know what drains them or energizes them. Because you want to make an audit on a very specific level. You want to think about everything you do on a weekend, everything that happens during the week, what actually drains versus energizes you, and how much. Is it a really strong thing that energizes you or just slightly, and so on. Often what happens when I do this with my clients is that they think they know, but as we investigate deeper, the answer is actually quite different. I can't tell you the number of people who suddenly realize that, say, their weekend isn't actually energizing them as much as they intellectually thought it did. Or in a different example, one of my clients insisted to me when we started working together, and let's be clear, she was completely exhausted when we started working together, that spending time with her children and her husband was the most energizing thing for her. But when we actually dug around in there, it turned out It wasn't. Not that she didn't love her kids and her husband, not that she didn't want to spend time with them. She did love them and she did want to spend time with them. It's just that when we were talking about what was most energizing for her, it was actually something else. It was actually that she needed to spend more time alone on her own, not necessarily with her kids and her husband, when she needed to increase her energy. The first step was actually for her and for all my clients, getting clear on that. And this leads me to the second reason why it can be really hard to actually truthfully know and implement what energizes versus drains you. It might end up feeling like it means something about your identity, or the answer might feel impossible to implement. Both of those situations were true for that client I just described. She didn't like the answer that she needed time away from her kids because she had the very strong belief. And really, in her initial conversations, she told me it was just a settled fact about the universe that, and I think this would be her approximate words, good moms want to spend all of their free time with their kids. She believed this so strongly. And I remember her telling me very, very definitively, why bother having kids at all if you don't want to spend your free time with them? She didn't feel that this was true for other moms, by the way, but it was definitely true for her. Eventually, through our work together, she was able to come to the belief, to genuinely believe that good moms spend some time away from their kids to take care of themselves, and that it could actually be better for her kids for her to spend time away from them. And this, plus a bunch of other things we did together, like freeing up some more time in her schedule, let her actually take some more actions to get some more energy. And this story, I feel like, told simply like this, can sound really obvious, but I can almost guarantee that you have beliefs like this. Beliefs that feel like proven facts about the universe, as obvious as the laws of gravity, and yet they are preventing you from doing what you need to do to get more energy. And the final thing I'll say about this sort of energy audit is that for many of my clients, when they first do this, they find, unfortunately, that it seems like almost everything in their lives drains them. There's maybe like one thing they like to do in a week that doesn't totally exhaust them. So if that's you, I just want to say it's okay. This is actually extremely, extremely useful information. You have to know the facts before you can actually start to make useful changes. So if this is you, if it feels like the only thing that actually energizes you in your week is just one thing, start there. Whatever you can do to rearrange your life, to open up space, do that and focus on that one thing. I had a client who, when we started doing this, the only thing that she actually liked to do that actually gave her more energy was to spend time alone, away from her family, watching Netflix on the couch. So we started there. We rearranged her life to give her some more time to watch Netflix alone on the couch. And eventually, as she had more energy, she found more things she liked to do. She actually loved tennis and she loved reading a book. These things actually gave her a better ROI on her energy. But you have to start where you are. That's number 2. And number 3 is to remember, and this is very important, when you are actually ready to pay it off, you should know that paying off energy debt can feel painfully slow, especially in the beginning. Again, this is true of debt more generally. Anytime you pay down any debt, you're basically just paying off interest with a little bit of principal. And it's like that with energy too. So this is to say, it's going to feel painful and slow. You will be paying down your energy debt, and you unfortunately won't feel amazing or full of energy right away. This is very common for my clients. There's an extended period of time where, yes, they're finally doing the right things to feel better, but they don't necessarily feel better right away. And to bring it back to the financial example, this could also happen to someone paying off their credit card debt. Finally, they've paid off a full credit card worth, for example, but they might think to themselves, oh, what's the point? There's still so much other debt to pay off. Why bother? It could be very tempting at this point then to just go out and buy things. If you're someone who likes to buy things, because paying off credit card debt is boring and you don't get anything fun out of it. With that, paid off credit card you now have, you could buy a cute outfit or a trip. You finally have a bit of available credit. Why not use it? I'm not even putting that down. I think there's a certain internal rationality to that choice. And it's funny because probably most of my clients wouldn't do that when it comes to their money. But many of them might unconsciously, at least, do that when it comes to their energy. Like they finally have a tiny bit of available energy, so they use it for a big work project or they make a family commitment, even though they are still in energy debt. I was just reminding a client last week who has made enormous, really just incredible progress on paying off a huge energy debt that she probably wants to keep a kind of like emergency fund because she in particular has a life that tends to send her unpredictable, expensive energy bills suddenly. Her life tends to suddenly ask something of her that requires quite a bit of energy. So just like financially, you'd want an emergency fund, you'll want that energetically too. You want enough buffer that something will come up and you'll be okay. In other words, as soon as you have a little bit of energy or a little bit of access to credit, do not spend it. And the final piece of advice that I'd give is hire a life coach. I think people are often confused about what life coaches actually do. And I do many things, but one of them is literally this. I help people get more energy in a bunch of different ways. I help them work fewer hours than they're currently working while not reducing the quality of work. I help them figure out how to be less drained and more energized by their personal lives. So this is my PSA officially about one thing that life coaching is. And if you'd like to learn more about working with me, you can, of course, go to katiesiever.com. Whew. Team, what an episode. What a first episode. It's my very sincere hope that this was helpful to you. I'm recording this right before Memorial Day weekend, and my goal this weekend is to go to Huntington Gardens, which is this local, very beautiful gardens here in LA this weekend with my family. And on Monday, I think we're going to set up the baby pool outside and let my kids splash around. Naked babies in the pool is the best. And I hope you have a beautiful, hopefully energizing weekend, everyone. As always, I'm rooting for you. You got this. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.